Just one comment, Megan, is that I guess yeah, both my colleagues Mark Tao and Jeff Henry should be waiting in the room. So if you are able to add them in right now, that'd be good.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to give you all a heads up that we'll begin the presentation around 6:05 p.m. So just give some folks, 3, 4 minutes to just make their way in. But again, just starting around 6:05 p.m. So thanks.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. Again, for those who just joined, I just want to let you know that we're going to start at 6:05 p.m. Just again, give some people some time to get in, but again, 6:05 should be the start time. All right. So it's 6:05 p.m. I think we can get started on this. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Simonidis, and I'm a planner with Arcadis from our Waterloo office. Excited to be here tonight for our open house number 2 for the phase 3 of the first draft official plan for the BAM official plan review. Again, I'm sure more people will be joining in, but I just wanted to let folks know that this open house will be streamed. It is currently being streamed on the BAM YouTube channel, and the recording will be uploaded online. Having said that, I want to say thank you to everyone that can attend tonight, as well as municipal staff and council. And yeah, with that, I will begin my presentation. And also one thing to note too, I just want to mention is that we are anticipating to end at around 8:30 p.m. That's the hard cutoff time. But I'll note that we'll certainly play that by ear, depending on the number of questions that we receive and or how the discussion goes. It may be cut earlier, but again, we'll play that by ear. So just a little background on who is in attendance tonight from the Arcadis team. So there's myself, Christian Simonidis. I'm a planner, again, from the Waterloo office. Jeff Henry is also in attendance. He's a planner as well from our Waterloo office. Mark Tao, principal and also the lead of the Kingston office, is in attendance. And last but not least, Emily Schnittke, who is our planning co-op student in attendance. So certainly all of us in attendance have uh, had a hand in preparing the draft official plan that we're going to go through tonight, and certainly will be available at the end for questions and or discussion period. First, I want to start off with a land acknowledgement, and we'll begin this open house by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by the Indigenous peoples of this great country. As settlers, we are grateful to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land throughout the years. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge that we gather on land in the Between the Lakes Treaty Territory, Treaty 3, 1792, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples. Arcadis acknowledges that there are treaties and agreements in place throughout Ontario, and we are thankful to be able to work and live here. We are thankful to those who have cared for these lands and continue to contribute to our collective strength. We are honored to collaborate with our Indigenous clients, partners, stakeholders, and communities. This slide here will provide an overview of the presentation. The first little bit will get into the background and our process of the official plan review project, as well as some background into what the planning hierarchy is, what an official plan is, what an official plan review is, as well as the number 5 and 6, which relate to the draft official plan text and the schedules and or appendices. That's where the bulk of the information will come from in those points 5 and 6. And I'll note that we will do our best to cover as much as we can, but certainly we want to summarize as much as we can, given that we'd probably be here for about 6-7 hours if we went through the entire document. Again, I'll go through that in the subsequent slides. And then following which, number 7 and 8, we will have a Q&A period. And as part of the Q&A period, that will be the sort of written submissions, if you will, where you will be able to use the Q&A function on Zoom to provide any questions should you not feel comfortable speaking out and turning on your camera verbally. And then following which there's the discussion period, which will allow people to unmute themselves, turn on their cameras, and we can have a discussion with respect to questions and comments with respect to this project. And then following which at the end, I'll provide the next steps and or additional information on this project. In terms of the process for the BAM official plan review, as you may all know, we are on phase 3 of the project, and this pertains to the first draft official plan release, which was provided in early December of last year. And I'll note too that in the subsequent phases, phase 4 and phase 5, that will phase 4 specifically will lead to the final draft and adoption of the official plan, whereby BAM Council will make a decision for adoption. And then phase 5, we will package all of the items together, the documents, all the consultation that has been completed to date, and send that to the County of Elgin for approval. I will note too that throughout this entire process, regardless of phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, engagement and consultation will be ongoing throughout the process. So again, we constantly encourage your questions, comments, feedback, whatever it may be throughout the entire process. So starting with the planning hierarchy. So this might be a familiar slide from a past open house and our other meetings, but certainly we want to make sure that for those who are in attendance who are unaware of the planning hierarchy in Ontario and how it relates to this project. So the planning hierarchy in the province of Ontario is broken down into 3 levels, which are the provincial, the county, and the local levels. As you work your way down the planning hierarchy, the policies and objectives become more specific in the local context within each of these listed documents. So starting at the provincial level at the top, this consists of the Planning Act and the Provincial Planning Statement. So the Planning Act is essentially the provincial legislation that sets out the ground rules for land use planning in Ontario. It describes how land uses may be controlled and who may control them. Following the Planning Act is the Provincial Planning Statement. So this provides provincial policy direction on key land use planning issues that affect communities. It also includes planning direction with respect to infrastructure, natural heritage features and resources, agricultural lands, housing, and so forth. And I'll note that this is a new document. It was previously noted as the Provincial Policy Statement, but was since updated to the Provincial Planning Statement in October of 2024. So this document now combines what was known as the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as well as the Provincial Policy Statement, and is now one document referred to as the Provincial Planning Statement. So next is the county or regional level, which is in the context of BAM includes the Elgin County Official Plan. So the Elgin County Official Plan implements the policies at the provincial level from above and includes general direction and guidance on a broader basis by establishing an upper tier policy framework that provides guidance on the local municipalities in preparation of local official plans and zoning bylaws. So finally, this is where we are at, where the municipality of BAM is at. So at the local level, this consists of the BAM official plan as well as the zoning bylaw, which implements both the provincial and county level policies, while also including more specific policies and objectives that pertain to BAM. So it's more specific in the local context. So you can see that the BAM official plan is highlighted in orange on the slide, and that indicates that this is the document our team is currently reviewing and updating as part of this project. So that document ultimately has to reflect all of those documents above it, the Planning Act, the Provincial Planning Statement, as well as the Elgin County Official Plan. And that's why a cake is on your screen, simply because there are layers to this hierarchy, to this system. And as you work your way down from the provincial level all the way to the local level, things become more specific. So what is an official plan? So essentially the BAM official plan contains goals, objectives, and policies to direct physical and land use change and their effects on the cultural, social, economic, and natural environment within BAM. I would also note that the official plan contains maps, which are also referred to as schedules, which are used to identify specific land use designations that apply to each parcel of land. It also implements the provincial policies and guidelines as well as the county policies, which again, I noted are above in the planning hierarchy, so it must conform and or be consistent with them. Now, what is an official plan review, and essentially what does this project mean? Why is it required? So the Planning Act requires municipalities to update their official plan every 5 years so that it, 1, is consistent with the provincial planning statement, 2, has regard to the matters of provincial interest, and 3, conforms with the upper tier Elgin County official plan. The official plan review also provides an opportunity to address the local priorities and changing community needs. So in essence, an official plan review is ultimately an update of the official plan document. So whereby, again, the Planning Act requires municipalities to update them every 5 years based on those 3 reasons. And I should note that the last time the municipality of BAM's official plan was last reviewed was in 2019, which is why we're now at that 5-year review period. Now, this is a continuation on of what is an official plan review. So with respect to how this all relates to that planning hierarchy, so the County of Elgin Council adopted the new Elgin County official plan on May 14th of 2024 and is still being reviewed by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for approval. So it's been quite some time since it's been adopted by Elgin County, but again, it's still under review by the province and we're waiting on their approval. Also, the new provincial planning statement, as I mentioned before, came into effect on October 20th. And certainly this draft official plan document that we're proposing tonight includes those policies to ensure it's consistent with it. So in essence, what does this mean for BAM? So ultimately, this project, this BAM official plan review, is what we're referring to as a conformity exercise to ensure that it conforms with the adopted Elgin County OP and is consistent with the new provincial planning statement. So essentially, all the work really has been completed by Elgin County, and it is now more so implementing the updates they have in their adopted official plan, as well as the new changes that are in the provincial planning statement. This also provides, again, an opportunity to create a robust and modernized look and or flow to the BAM official plan. So now moving on to the meat and potatoes, if you will, for tonight's meeting. So this really gets into the draft official plan document. And again, like I previously mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, I won't be getting into every single detail, but I will be mentioning some of the notable changes and what each section means and some of the schedules. So ultimately, this draft official plan consists of 11 sections. And these are noted on the slide here. There's the introduction, growth management and community structure, rural area, settlement areas, and so forth. So currently the current BAM official plan has 8 sections. This one now has 11 sections. And the reason why more sections have been added and or created was to make sure that each section and or theme or topic has its own distinct section in the official plan. It makes it much easier to read and understand how things relate to one another, rather than having policies that are scattered throughout the document and trying to piece together how it relates to one another. So this certainly, in our eyes, streamlines things and makes it much easier to interpret in terms of consolidating the policies that pertain to, for example, the natural system are all within Section 5. Certainly there is some crossover, but the intent of having more sections was to ensure that each theme and or topic is captured in its own independent section. And next will be the schedules and or appendices. So the draft official plan consists of the following 9 schedules and or appendices. The first being Schedule A, the BAM structure plan, Schedule B, the land use plan for the overall land use plan of BAM, and then Schedule B1, 2, and 3 is just more so a zoomed in version, if you will, of the land use plan for the village of Straffordville, village of Vienna, and the village of Port Burwell. Schedule C pertains to the natural heritage system, and Schedule D pertains to Richmond's specific source water management protection policies. Appendix 1 pertains to development hazards, and Appendix 2 pertains to the natural resource management areas. So I will be providing visuals on these. Again, I just wanted to provide a list of these schedules, and I will provide a breakdown of what they mean further in the subsequent slides. So again, just to reiterate, this draft official plan namely includes policies from the provincial planning statement to ensure consistency, as well as policies from the adopted County of Elgin official plan to ensure conformity. Now, the following slides will provide a breakdown of each section, specifically noting the purpose of each section, some notable changes compared to the current BAM official plan, as well as the applicable schedules and or appendices that are associated with each new section. And again, I won't be going into every single policy, but again, just the notable changes that are quite apparent, and that I want to flag for you all tonight. So starting with Section 1, which is the introduction, this one is pretty straightforward in terms of its purpose. So it provides an overview of the purpose, background, and or the organization of the official plan. In terms of some of the notable changes, we've established what's known as a 30-year planning horizon that will guide growth and development in the municipality to the year 2054. So we've updated that planning horizon within this document. It also includes a new subsection outlining the structure of the plan, as well as how it should be read and or interpreted. This section also includes an overview of the Ontario planning system and the relationship between the Planning Act, provincial planning statement, county's official plan, and the municipality's official plan, as well as the zoning bylaw. So ultimately, the introduction is for those who may not be familiar with an official plan and don't understand it or need some additional background. This ultimately is the first section to look at in terms of getting an understanding of what does this document mean and how to read it. Section number 2. So this pertains to growth management and the community structure. So the purpose of this section is ultimately to provide policies that relate to growth management and the municipality's overall land use structure, notably broken into 3 sections. That includes the settlement areas, the rural area, which is the areas outside of the settlement areas, and the strategic employment areas within the municipality. Now, this, as I noted, some of these sections pertain to some of the schedules and our mapping. So this really pertains to Schedule A, the BAM structure plan, which I will touch on in the next slide. But ultimately, some of the notable changes that have occurred since in this section is that we have maintained the existing hierarchy system and our classification of the settlement area. So there's 3 tiers. We've maintained them. They have not changed for Straffordville, Eden, Port Burwell, Vienna, etc. So I'll get into that further, but again, we've maintained that existing hierarchy as per the county's adopted official plan. We've also made updates to the settlement area expansion policies for Tier 1 settlement areas and settlement area boundary adjustments, which were updated truly to reflect the new provincial planning statement, which made some amendments in that respect. There also prohibits the establishment of new settlement areas and only permits the expansion of Tier 2 or 3 settlement areas until full municipal servicing is available. So the Tier 2 and Tier 3 settlement areas are namely on private and or partial servicing. So they private well, private septic, a combination of municipal servicing and private servicing. So those would only be permitted, expansions would only be permitted until full servicing is available. There's also policies that encourage residential intensification and redevelopment within the existing settlement areas to assist the county's goal in their 16% target of all new residential development to be achieved through residential intensification and redevelopment. This section also identifies and protects strategic employment areas that are of strategic importance to the municipality due to their contribution to the local economy as well as the broader regional economy. And this specifically pertains to the industrial park really in the north of BAM that's existing. So this next slide really provides a visual of this, and I should be able to have a laser pointer ability. Yeah, there it is. So ultimately, like I mentioned before, these are the tiers, the hierarchy of the tiers of the settlement areas. And this is noted on Schedule A of BAM structure plan. So Tier 1 pertains to the village of Vienna and village of Port Burwell, and it's noted in the darker purple. The Tier 2 settlement areas, which pertain to the village of Straffordville and the hamlet of Eden, are pictured in the medium purple, if you will. And the Tier 3 settlement areas are listed here. Corinth, North Hall, Richmond, and Colton are also are noted as Tier 3 in the light purple. And as I previously mentioned, this structure plan identifies the 3 areas. So 1 being the settlement areas, 2 being the rural area. So the rural area pertains to all lands essentially outside of the settlement areas, outside of these urban boundaries, and really pertains to the prime agricultural areas within the municipality. Now, the strategic employment areas, like I mentioned in the last slide, pertains to here at the top of your screen here, which is identified in orange as the strategic employment areas, which pertains to the existing industrial park within BAM. And yeah, so essentially, we have taken what the adopted county official plan has done, and made it specific to BAM in this respect. So that pertains to Section 2 as well as Schedule A. And moving on to the next slide. So I'll just turn off my laser pointer. There we go. So Section 3 pertains to that rural area that I mentioned. So the area that's beyond and outside of those settlement areas. So the purpose of this section is ultimately to provide detailed policies to protect the rural area, which include land use policies for the agricultural area designation and other non-agricultural land use designations, which include estate residential, mobile home parks, seasonal travel, trailer and campgrounds, institutional, commercial, highway commercial, recreational, industrial, conservation lands, as well as licensed pits and quarries. So to really summarize that, ultimately the rural area is separated into land use policies, one pertaining to the agricultural area for agricultural uses, and then it's separated into other non-agricultural designations that are typically already existing anyway. So existing estate residential designations, mobile home parks, etc. So those pertain to the existing ones. Now, in terms of what are some notable changes, so there have been quite some substantial changes to this section, notably because BAM, as you know, is a rural municipality. So, there would logically be, amendments and or focus on the rural area section. So essentially, we've updated the additional residential unit policies within the rural area to reflect the new requirements in the provincial planning statement, which now permits a maximum of 2 ARUs, as opposed to 1 that was in the previous iteration. So ultimately, it would increase from 1 to 2 ARUs. And for those that don't know, an additional residential unit is ultimately an additional dwelling unit that would be smaller and or subordinate or secondary to the primary dwelling on a subject property. So think of it as similar to a granny flat or a basement unit, for example. So it would be smaller and subordinate to the primary dwelling, which is maybe single detached dwelling. In this case, it would be a single detached dwelling in the rural area because that's what's permitted. So ultimately, yes, it would be from 1 to 2 ARUs. We've also made some substantial improvements to the on-farm diversified uses policies, specifically by providing greater clarity in terms of the permitted uses, the size, scale, location of such uses. So in the current BAM official plan, there certainly is some uncertainty and areas that need more clarification. And with these updates to this draft official plan, we're hoping that will provide some greater clarity for those seeking to implement on-farm diversified uses in the future. So I'll also note that we've included a temporary outdoor special events policy, or policies rather, for hosting large-scale temporary outdoor events such as fairs, festivals, concerts, plowing matches, historical reenactments, etc., within this rural area. Now, these policies are come directly from the adopted County of Elgin official plan, which is why we've mirrored many of them, except we've added some specific policies to ensure that this is properly regulated and the proper approvals are in place, such as receiving potentially a temporary use bylaw as a way to implement this, or a special event permit or the equivalent under the Municipal Act. So again, this was a reflection of the adopted county official plan. And continuing on with some of the additional changes. So we also made some improvements, likewise, to the on-farm diversified uses. We made some improvements to the agriculturally related uses, home-based business and industries, as well as the core agritourism operations policies, again, in terms of clarifying the permitted uses as well as the requirements within them. And I will note that these are namely from the adopted County of Elgin official plan, which really beefed up those policies and really, again, provided more clarity compared to what's in the current official plan for those looking to have these agriculturally related uses, home-based businesses, etc., as secondary to the primary agricultural use on their lot. I would also know that there was a terminology change within the section. So the term supplementary farm dwelling, which pertains to seasonal farm labor housing from the current BAM OP, is now referred to as farm labor accommodations to match the terminology of the adopted Elgin County OP. So there are little things like this that have been updated within the official plan to ensure continuity, because I'm sure for those who may be, looking for development application currently or in the future, some of the terminology is different among the Elgin County's official plan, among BAM's official plan, and even among other municipalities across Ontario. So the intent is to make this as easy to interpret as possible and make sure that the terminology is essentially matched to Elgin County's OP. I would also note that there were some improvements to the policies pertaining to new or expanding non-agricultural uses in the rural area, explicitly requiring an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, as well as demonstrating consistency with the provincial planning statement for non-agricultural uses in prime agricultural areas where applicable. So ultimately, we've made it more explicit and are clear that if someone is proposing a non-agricultural use within the rural area, it's quite upfront that you would require an OP amendment, an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, as well as demonstration to the provincial planning statement, and some additional, certainly some additional studies, reports, plans to support that, to ensure that the protection of prime agricultural land within BAM. So this is Schedule B, the land use plan, and this may be difficult to see on your screen. This is a lot easier to see on your own, not necessarily through a PowerPoint. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this schedule here provides that distinction between the agricultural area, which I noted is in white here, and as per the legend, versus those non-agricultural land use designations, which I've listed previously in other slides, such as estate residential, mobile home parks, etc. So this plan here ultimately provides the land use designations for the agricultural area and the non-agricultural area, non-agricultural land use designations within BAM, and notably those that are existing. Now, moving on to section 4, the settlement areas. So the purpose of this section is essentially provides detailed policies relating to the settlement area, including the land use designations, which specifies the type, scale, and form and development, as well as the range of uses appropriate for each land use designation. So ultimately, what this is it contains the policies that are specific to land use designations within those settlement areas, within those urban areas within BAM. So as noted, this consists of the Tier 1 settlement areas, so Village of Vienna and Port Burwell, Tier 2, Village of Stratfordville and Hamlet of Eden, and the remaining Tier 3 settlement areas of Corinth, Colton, North Hall, and Richmond. Now, in terms of what are some notable changes, it introduces some new policies pertaining to community design and protecting urban character, which is ultimately a reflection of the Elgin County's adopted official plan, which encourages new development to be designed in keeping with the traditional character of settlement areas, achieves high quality design, improves streetscapes, etc. So that essentially pertains to more so the urban character and urban design aspects, if you will, for any new development. I would also note too that it specifies this section now specifies general development policies between each of the tiers, based on the available servicing. So, it essentially means that areas that are on full municipal servicing have different requirements and/or development policies versus settlement areas such as the Tier 3 ones that are on independent and/or private servicing. For example, there's greater ability for residential intensification and/or development within the full municipal servicing Tier 1 settlement areas, as opposed to the Tier 3 settlement areas that are on independent and or private servicing, which certainly limits development, and that's not necessarily where growth of residential intensification and infill should necessarily occur outside of areas that aren't on full municipal servicing. To continue on with some of the notable changes, so it also introduces a new policy as per the adopted Elgin County OP that encourages new development in settlement areas to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change, and that pertains to development standards or building standards that potentially exceed the Ontario Building Code, low impact development methods, certain plantings, etc. Although that is more specific at a site level, these are certainly policies that are noted in here to encourage such development, again, to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change. I would also note too that there were minor refinements to the additional residential unit policies within settlement areas to reflect the requirements in the new provincial planning statement. So currently, the current BAM official plan already permits a maximum of 2 ARUs, where a single detached, semi-detached, and/or row house dwellings are permitted on a lot. So that hasn't changed. It still remains as a maximum of 2. But again, we've just made some refinements in terms of the wording and just more clarification, if you will, with when compared to the current BAM official plan. I would also note that many of the existing land use designations, such as hamlet, residential, multi-unit residential, harbor residential / commercial, industrial, institutional, and open space within these settlement areas, and their policies are generally unchanged from the current BAM official plan. So those have more or less remained the same with some minor tweaks in there, but again, more or less the same. So this next slide here goes through the schedules that pertain to the land use schedules that pertain to the settlement areas, specifically the village of Stratfordville, which you see on your screen. The next being the village of Vienna, and the following slide would be the village of Port Burwell. So ultimately, the land use designations have not changed on this map. They remain as they exist today. But I will note, and you'll see in the outline, it's outlined in purple on the map, which is noted as specific policy area number 15. Now that is a specific policy area and or regulation or provision rather that we've added to large tracts of agricultural lots within these settlement areas, but that pertains to section 10 of the draft official plan. So I will get back to that in the future in subsequent slides. But that's just something to note as we go through this presentation. Again, similarly, again, no major changes with respect to land use designations, the residential, commercial, institutional, etc., as well as those constraints such as the hazard lands, flood fringe, etc., all remain in place, except, again, notably the specific policy area number 15, which, again, I'll just maybe clarify with outlining it with my laser pointer here. So really the purple outline here is what I'm talking about, which has been updated in these 2 schedules. And again, I will touch base on that further. The next is the village of Port Burwell. Again, same principle. The land use designations more or less have remained the same. But I will note, and I will bring back my laser pointer, to mention that, so there were previous discussions as part of past special council meetings, regular council meetings, etc., that Arcadis and or the municipality of BAM was proposing to remove the Port Burwell Provincial Park. Just given that it's not, it's an open space use that is not that doesn't permit urban and or development that is that pertains to settlement areas. So, but what I will note is that after we had further discussions with the province as well as consultation with the county, the Port Burwell Provincial Park will continue to remain within the village of Port Burwell. Since the county did not make any amendments to their official plan schedules with respect to the provincial park boundaries, and given that this is again a conformity review or conforming to their plans, we've opted to keep the Port Burwell Provincial Park within the settlement area. Now I'll turn off my laser pointer here. So again, that really are some notable changes. I will say that there were some minor amendments here that again pertain to this lot here in the north, where it's just an existing residential use that we've just made to be designated as residential in yellow, and an existing fire hall that we've designated to institutional. So just some minor clerical amendments here and there, but more or less this is what has been presented in terms of the first draft official plan of Schedule B3 for Port Burwell. So moving on to section 5. So this pertains to the natural system. So the intent and or purpose of this section is to provide policies that protect the natural heritage system and their hydrologic and ecological functions from adverse environmental impact. So ultimately, the natural system is composed of significant wetlands, significant coastal wetlands, significant woodlands, significant valley lands, areas of natural and scientific interest, which is referred to as ANSIs, significant wildlife habitat, fish habitat, habitat of threatened or endangered species, surface water and or groundwater. So ultimately, this section pertains to those aspects of the natural system. And what I will note that this pertains to Schedule C of the first draft official plan, the natural system, which is a reflection of the adopted county official plan mapping. So again, the notable change is that we've updated the mapping and our Schedule C to incorporate those boundary updates that the county of Elgin went through that exercise. And then also it maintains many of the existing natural heritage, natural system features that are currently designated within BAM, again, to ensure their protection. It also provides clarification on how development proposals within or adjacent to the natural system will be evaluated and as well as the required approvals should someone wish to develop within or adjacent to these natural systems. I would also note to where destruction and or alteration of the natural system occurs. We've also included a policy pertaining to restoring the feature or providing compensation with respect to restoration of equal or greater ecological value. So again, the intent is to protect the natural heritage system of the municipality and really beef up those policies to ensure that the municipality is covered in that respect and meets the adopted county official plan policies as well as the new PPS policies. So this is Schedule C. This pertains to natural system. Again, this is quite a daunting schedule here, a lot going on, but certainly this covers the main overlays and or designations pertaining to the natural system, which then correlates with the policies within the text portion. So ultimately, if a property is impacted by say, a provincially significant wetland, you would refer to the text section and what some of the permissions are and or what the necessary approvals are to proceed moving forward. So section 6, so this is quite a substantial section. This combines both the transportation and the infrastructure systems within a BAM. So it provides policies that ultimately provide for the integrated development of a safe and effective transportation and infrastructure systems, including local and county roads, railways, marine ports, etc., as well as the wastewater, water systems, and stormwater management systems, etc. So some of the notable changes are it establishes new policies regarding the allocation of phasing of new servicing, so water and sanitary, in keeping with the provincial and county requirements to ensure future development can be serviced. It also improves on the source water protection policies from the adopted Elgin County OP, notably the wellhead protection area surrounding the hamlet of Richmond. I would also note that incorporates new policies encouraging and enhancing the development of future pedestrian and cycling routes and facilities, which is again a reflection of the adopted Elgin County official plan. It maintains existing policies relating to energy systems and promoting the use and development of alternative and renewable energy systems with some additional clarification. And that pertains to, wind farms, solar panels for, residential use, etc. Now, as I noted before, so there isn't a schedule that necessarily pertains to the transportation and or water and wastewater servicing, but what has been included as part of this section as it relates to is Schedule D, which is the Richmond's water resources, specifically the wellhead protection area. So there has been no change to this schedule ultimately from the current official plan. It is more so updating what the Elgin County had provided in their new and updated information in that respect. So there's the wellhead protection area A, B, and C, And again, there's policies within the new official plan that or proposed official plan that includes policies in that respect to ensure protection of the groundwater system. So moving on to section 7. So this pertains to natural resource and management area. So this purpose of this section is to provide policies on the natural resources within the municipality, including extraction of mineral, petroleum, mineral aggregate, and salt resources. So the natural resource management area is composed of areas of potential aggregate resource, areas of potential mineral resource, potential petroleum resource, as well as natural resource extraction operations. So what are some of the notable changes? So really, this creates a distinct section for these what the natural resource management areas are composed of, rather than having it scattered throughout what's in the current official plan. So now it expands on the existing policies from the current official plan as well. It includes new policies in accordance with the province and county related to the extraction of mineral aggregate resources through existing, new, or expanding operations. So those relate to pits and or quarries, as well as expands the list of reports, plans, studies that may be required for a new mineral aggregate extraction operation or expansion to an existing one. So again, we've just really broadened the list of reports, studies, plans, et cetera, that may be required to ensure that such a development or proposal in the future does not have adverse impacts to the surrounding area. And this pertains to Appendix 2, natural resource management areas. Again, you can see the red area is the aggregate resource area where there's potential for extraction of gravel, sand, what have you. And then the petroleum pools pertains to the orange and or yellowish color that you see on your screen. Again, this is a reflection of the mapping that was provided by the adopted Elgin County official plan. So section 8 with development hazards. So this provides policies to avoid or mitigate potential negative impacts to public health and safety and risks to property and infrastructure due to natural and human-made hazards in the municipality. So development hazards are composed of hazardous lands such as floodplains, dynamic beach hazards, erosion hazards, hazardous sites, former waste disposal sites, contaminated and potentially contaminated sites, oil, gas, and sand hazards, wildfire hazards, former natural resource extraction operations, and abandoned petroleum wells. So what are some of the notable changes? Again, many of the policies do remain the same, with some expansion based on the adopted Elgin County official plan. However, I will note that this section now combines policies related to both the natural hazards and human-made hazards. Again, natural being floodplains, dynamic beach hazards, etc., versus human-made hazards, which could be former waste disposal sites or contaminated sites. It also recognizes the potential of impacts from climate change as a natural hazard to the built and natural environment. Introduces new policies regarding development on or adjacent to abandoned petroleum wells, wildland fire hazards, and contaminated or potentially contaminated sites. So it really adds new policies and or beefs those up from what's existing to ensure that those hazards are properly dealt with. And again, this is the map here, Appendix 1, that relates to that. So the yellow is the hazard lands, as you can see, and namely that the hazard lands that you can see there on your screen pertains to the Long Point Region Conservation Authorities mapping along many of the tributaries and or natural systems that are within the municipality of BAM. So that pertains to natural hazards. And then those little purple dots pertain to existing and or closed or abandoned petroleum wells within the municipality. Moving on to the general policy. So this provides policies with respect to economic development, housing, cultural heritage, and climate change for the entire municipality and are not specific to the designated areas of land. So starting with economic development, the new subsection for economic development, which focuses on supporting and promoting tourism, placemaking initiatives, and knowledge-based economic activities. Again, this is a reflection of the adopted Elgin County OP policies. It also recognizes the importance of protecting the urban and rural character of the municipality as an economic driver. So again, that sort of relates to those Section 4 and Section 3 of the rural area and settlement areas. If you protect those areas and the character of the urban and rural rural areas of the municipality, then that certainly can continue economic growth within the municipality. So this section namely comes from the adopted Elgin County OP. Moving on to housing, so we've created a new distinct section for housing under the general policies. So ultimately, some of the changes are a new policy for range and mix of housing typologies, whereby single detached dwellings shall generally not comprise more than 70% of new residential dwelling mixes. So essentially, in a plan of subdivision, generally speaking, it is discouraged to have more than 70% of new residential dwellings being single detached dwellings to ultimately provide a greater range in our mix of housing. This ultimately promotes the also the next phase is to our policies promotes the development of affordable housing and assists the County of Elgin in their target of achieving a cumulative total of 55% of new residential development, new residential units developed across the county. Again, that's a county-wide target. I want to emphasize that in terms of helping them achieve that. There's also updates to the terminology and policies around group homes, temporary housing, as well as subsidized housing to reflect the adopted Elgin County OP. It includes policies pertaining to the coordination with provincial and federal governments and agencies to advocate for sustained provincial and federal funding for affordable housing options, energy efficiency, and sustainable housing designs for new and existing residential units, etc. So moving on to the cultural heritage. So we've created a new cultural heritage section within the general policies section. So there is technically a cultural heritage section within the current OP. And a lot of this section does maintain many of those existing policies, but I will note that it introduces new policies around Indigenous and archaeological resources and requirements for engagement with these Indigenous communities impacted within BAM. And last but not least is the climate change subsection. So it recognizes the potential impacts of climate change on both the built and natural environment. It incorporates many of those existing policies from the current BAM official plan, such as granting the municipality the ability to prepare and adopt a municipal energy plan and local action plan, which already exists and was prepared in 2018 and is subsequently being there will be a subsequent update in that for as part of a future project. Section 10. So this relates to the specific policy areas, and you may recall from a while ago, this pertains to, as I noted, specific policy area number 15, and I will get into that. So ultimately, the purpose of this section is to provide the specific policy areas pertaining to site-specific official planments that have already been approved to date on a site-by-site basis. So these specific policy areas are also mapped throughout the draft OP schedules. And notably, it's Schedule B1, B2, and Schedule B. Any new approved official plan amendment applications would be added to this section and mapped accordingly, so that we'd be continuing the list of the site-specific policy areas. So what are some notable changes? So we've maintained all the existing specific policy areas from the current one. We've carried them over. It also consolidates all the specific policy areas into this specific section, rather than what's the current situation, and that the current BAM official plan has them scattered throughout. So this consolidates them into one area to refer to. Now, going back to what I talked about with the new specific policy area number 15. So we've added this specific policy area to the OP, specifically for larger agricultural tracts that are within the Tier 1 and Tier 2 settlement area boundaries, which include Vienna, Straffordville, and potential and Port Burwell. Though there isn't one for Port Burwell, but I will say that there could be for the potential of that in the future. But essentially, the intent of this policy is to ensure that prior to any approval of development, the municipality would require the preparation and approval of a servicing study to demonstrate that the available capacity of existing full or partial water and sanitary sewage systems are in accordance with the policies of the official plan, and that the cost of any required upgrades or extensions of existing services shall be at the expense of the applicant. So the intent is to make sure that those larger agricultural tracts, which I will show here on my screen, are developed in a comprehensive manner, ensuring that there is sufficient and capable servicing for those sites should they be developed in the future. Again, notably for a settlement area like Stratfordville, which is on partial servicing. So that's certainly an area to look out for, especially for new development that may occur on these large tracts of agricultural um, uh, of existing agricultural uses within the settlement area. And what I will note too, just as a little highlight, this is essentially what I'm referring to in terms of the text and the mapping. So this is an example. So specific policy area number 14 is noted here. You'd refer to it in section 10, read how it relates, what it requested, what it means. And it's noted here on Schedule B, and this is a little excerpt of it. So there's an arrow pointing to the site, and again, letting you know that there is a site-specific policy area on that site. So this is the last section. I know I've been doing quite a bit of talking. So this is the purpose of this section for the implementation section. Essentially describes the mechanisms and the processes for the administration and the implementation of the official plan. So it's really the toolbox, if you will, for the municipality to delegate authority, implement certain studies, etc. So what are some notable changes? So we've updated the pre-consultation requirements, and just a little heads up or background, pre-consultation is required, or not required anymore, but pre-consultation is essentially a meeting a meeting with the municipality, county agencies prior to initiating a formal development application, whether that's a zoning bylaw amendment application or an official plan amendment application. You'd come to the municipality for pre-consultation. The municipality and the county and agencies would provide you the list of requirements for a complete application. But what I will note is that we've updated in accordance with Bill 185 to strongly encourage it rather than it being required. So the province now no longer requires it, it's strongly encouraged. We've also expanded on the list of reports, studies, plans that could be required for a complete development application. We've also updated planning tools that the municipality may enlist in the future, which includes community improvement plans, block plans, master environmental servicing plans, etc. It also introduces additional Indigenous consultation policies, which again, namely reflects the adopted County of Elgin official plan policies. So, yes, I know I was talking for quite a bit there, but now we can move on to the Q&A period as well as the discussion period. So what I want to highlight before we get into this is that the intent of the Q&A period now is non-verbal. So you will use the Q&A function that you see on Zoom at the bottom of your screen there. There's that little toolbar, and you can enter in your questions on the area and within the Q&A box there. So Arcadis or BAM staff will then provide a verbal response to each of your questions. Certainly, depending on the time, we're going to aim for about 30 minutes, more or less, on this. We'll certainly play this by ear depending on how many questions we receive. Following that, we will then have the verbal and or discussion period in the subsequent slide. So certainly I'd encourage those now who have any questions within the to type away within the Q&A. If not, then we can potentially move on to the discussion period, but I'll give folks a couple of minutes to type anything in the chat if they'd like. So again, and what I want to note too is that if your question is missed or you don't feel comfortable typing it in, or don't feel comfortable speaking out loud, you're always encouraged to provide your comments, questions, or feedback on this project at the opreview@bam.ontario.ca handle there, the email there, as well as written submissions that can be mailed to the municipal office. So what I'll do is I'll have Megan, if there are any Q&As, if there are any questions that are come up, I'll have Megan from the municipality, Megan Elliott, be the moderator, uh, and then read out the questions, and then I will try to address them. Our Arcadis staff will do our best to address them. So we'll give a couple minutes. All right. It's not looking like people want to talk in the Q&A. Maybe there's some people willing to discuss verbally. So we can certainly move on.
Christian,
Oh, yes. Sorry.
I do have a couple questions here.
Oh, sorry. I thought, sorry, I apologize for that. I thought I could see the questions on my screen and I didn't see any. So again, I apologize for that. I don't mean to move on. So go ahead.
Okay, so we have two questions. The first one comes from Jeff B. I'm not going to try and say his last name because I'll probably get it wrong. His question is, does the municipality intend to implement any form of design guidelines that address the built form and architectural quality of new buildings? These can be enforced through complete application requirements. Is this something the municipality will consider?
Yeah, so I can certainly answer that. So thank you for that question. So in terms of the urban design and our built form policy, so um, as it stands right now, the draft official plan does not have a specific section pertaining to urban design guidelines. And I would also note that the municipality currently doesn't have an urban design guideline document that is separate from the official plan as an independent sort of guideline document. But what I will note though is that there are there are some policies that are scattered throughout um, the draft official plan that do pertain to the built form and or encouraging urban character and or addressing streetscape, even comments pertaining to landscaping, etc., are within the policies. But I will note that those specifics relating to built form and or architectural quality, though they are noted, there is no distinct section in this official plan, and that, in my opinion, is more so suited for a separate document through an urban design guideline. But I'd also note too that the built form and or specific design uh, regulations are also a reflection of what's in the zoning bylaw too, in terms of setbacks, lot coverage, etc., which does also have an influence on that, which would be in a subsequent review beyond this project. So ultimately, to answer your question, there are design guidelines that are within it, and I do believe that within the like I noted, let me go back to it actually. This slide here in the implementation section, it's my understanding that there are, as I noted, we've updated the list of planning tools and or the expanding on the list of reports and or studies and plans that could be required for a complete application. And it's my understanding that an urban design brief is required within that. So that's something that may, depending on the nature of a proposed development, would be implemented should a development application come through. So. I
Okay,
hope I
next.
answered that. And certainly, if you'd like to speak verbally and discuss further in the subsequent section, then I can certainly provide further clarity. So thanks.
Next question is from an anonymous participant. Asks, why is Richmond considered a tier 3 settlement area? It has partial servicing through municipal water.
Yes, great question. So I maybe Margaret might be the best person to answer that from the municipality, but it's my understanding that it's has existed historically as a tier 3 settlement area, though it is again, like you noted, partially serviced from a water perspective. And it's my understanding that that water system was assumed many years ago by the municipality. It was private at one point, but was assumed by the municipality, and now they are ultimately responsible for upkeeping that. So the intent, like I've noted before, is to keep what the county has implemented in that Richmond is a tier 3 settlement area, despite that unique circumstance, and that it would remain as a tier 3 settlement area in conformity with the Elgin County's adopted official plan as well as even their current official plan. So that's something that is a very unique situation, again, based on that history of the um, water servicing going from private and then being assumed by the municipality. But again, that's my understanding of that situation. I know that that certainly predates my my time as a consultant planner for the municipality, but Yeah, I certainly would note that that would remain as tier three, given that existing circumstance. And again, it's a conformity exercise. County didn't change it, so therefore we would keep it as is.
Okay, next question. How is Bayham complying to Elgin Section 8.24?
Yeah, so I will. A good thing I have, though, the Elgin County's OP up, so I can take a look at that because I don't have that memorized. All the policies memorized, but let me just take a look. Give me one moment. So you said 8.24, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so ultimately, so for those in attendance, ultimately section 8.24 in the adopted Elgin County official plan pertains to servicing policies within the local official plan. And it ultimately requires that the local official plans develop detailed policies with respect to servicing of development within both the rural area and settlement areas, including policies that at a minimum address a number of criteria. So ultimately, we have included that section within the current BAM official plan. And if I look, because I'm wondering if someone from my staff can just take a look at which specific section that it is referred to in the BAM draft official plan, because I do know that that was reflected in terms of implementing phasing policies of allocation of servicing to ensure that there is sufficient servicing for, say, proposed development. And I believe that that pertains to, yeah, so we've essentially addressed that through section 6.4.3. That's one aspect. So that pertains to the allocation and phasing of servicing to ensure that there's orderly development occurs in a manner that certainly is conscious of the available servicing, given that yeah, there may be servicing restraints in the future. And let me find another section, but I will note that there are sections throughout, and that would be noted within section 6, the transportation, and I'll go back to this here. So namely that section from the Elgin County's adopted OP 8.24 would be addressed and or noted within section 6 of the draft official plan. And again, I've noted this here in terms of allocation and phasing of servicing and ensuring that there's orderly development and logical extension of servicing. And it would also be noted throughout settlement area, so section 4 uh, policies as well that also do have policies like I noted here that pertain to the available servicing, whether it be on full municipal, partial, or independent or private servicing. So it certainly this draft official plan certainly addresses those policies pertaining to servicing in the adopted Elgin County OP.
Okay, next question. In regards to tier 3 development zones, are you saying that you will not approve development unless services in brackets water sewer are available, or are you suggesting that confirmation of wells and septics via perk test water studies? Thanks.
Yes, that is correct. And for some reason, I'm having issues getting back to my screen here. Uh-oh. You can still hear me, correct? Okay, there we go. Yeah, so yeah, I just want to be clear. Yeah, so so development is certainly still encouraged and or permitted within tier 3. The idea and or what there may be some confusion between what I noted in terms of expansion of these tier 3 settlement areas, but I would also note that development is limited in terms of say what can be proposed in terms of a broader draft plan of subdivision, for example, of 20, 30, 40 homes is certainly not, I don't want to say outright not viable, but would have to be further assessed in detail, as you noted, through hydrogeological studies, servicing studies, evaluation of the septic servicing, etc., to ensure that their development occurs in an orderly fashion. So again, I want to note that, yeah, tier 3 development, which namely does pertain to single detached dwellings, would still be permitted. However, the expansion of tier 3 settlement areas that are currently on that don't have full servicing, full municipal servicing, would not be permitted. But again, I'll note that there would be greater uh, greater reports, lists of plans and studies and such to ensure that the development that's being proposed within those tier 3 settlement areas don't have an impact, say, to the groundwater if you introduce more wells, or don't have an impact to the groundwater if you introduce more septic beds, which again potentially could relate to further issues or issues of groundwater contamination. So things like that will certainly be evaluated within the tier 3 settlement areas should development be proposed within the existing boundaries of them.
That is currently all the questions right now.
Sure, I can maybe give a minute more, I'd say, and then I'll just go back to the Q&A slide. And what I'd like to know too is, and just going back to one of the questions pertaining to um, uh, servicing, especially notably that section 8.24. I'd note that a lot of those, a section that does address it relates to 6.4.2 in the draft official plan. And I'd also like to note specifically pertaining to that tier 3 question that there are policies throughout the official plan, notably section 4.2.4, section 6.4.7, that pertain to individual servicing. So there are policies noted throughout that pertain to servicing, again, based on the unique circumstances of whether there's independent or private servicing versus partial municipal servicing versus full municipal servicing. So if that's it for Q&A, we can certainly move on to the discussion period now, which is again the verbal questions, if you will, and or comments. So what I'll ask for those who are in attendance, if you have any questions, I would ask that you please hit the react function on Zoom that you'll see at the bottom with that little heart, and there should be a raise your hand function. So if you want to click that, then from there, you'll be unmuted by staff and you'd have an opportunity to provide your questions verbally, and Arcadis or BAM staff will then provide a response to your question. So certainly provide a reaction, and if you can't, just certainly you can unmute yourself. Don't feel obligated to use that react function. It just makes it easier to gauge who wants to speak. So. And I'd like to know too, again, want to reiterate, if you feel more comfortable providing questions, comments, feedback through the email, that's certainly fine, as well as written submissions. We also do encourage one-on-one consultation too. So if you'd like to have a discussion with our staff following this meeting in another separate virtual call that isn't recorded or, um, uh, or being streamed, what have you, if you're not comfortable with that, then certainly we can have discussions beyond this meeting. But again, now's the time certainly to ask any questions, but there will always be opportunity in the future. So I see Barry Wade with his hand up. Do you mind unmuting, or I don't know if we need administrative staff to do that, but here we go.
Not Barry, it's Suzanne.
Oh, yes. Hi, Suzanne.
Um, I'm just trying to determine because it's complicated. We've identified vulnerable groundwater zones and sensitive groundwater areas, which is typically under source water protection. Groundwaters are protected with various land use constraints, such as salt applications and nitrate applications in order because they're highly vulnerable aquifers. But also within these zones, we're having development on partial services, whereas we still aren't seeing regional studies, sub-watershed studies to determine the impact on the groundwater, which is now a new component on protecting sensitive groundwater resources. I don't know how this is being compatible. The types of studies that have, and I ask this because the types of studies that have been approved in the past are site-specific studies that tell you there's enough water at the time, but it does not say under development pressure and climate change whether there will be a long-term viability of the groundwater resource in those areas. And I'm wondering how all of these components are being and competitive uses, such as like agriculture also needs the groundwater as well. So as development progresses in these areas on partial services, I have to wonder how BAM is going to bring all of these official plan policies under one umbrella. Because if it's done on a piecemeal basis, it's not going to work.
Right. Then that's certainly a great question. And yeah, I can provide a response to that. So, and I know that there's a number of aspects to your questions and our comments. So, with respect to development that occurs on partial or private servicing, whether that's, private well, private septic, etc., on those within those areas that are identified as having highly vulnerable aquifers, that pertain to the groundwater. I will note, and you did note that there are certainly reports and or studies, plans, etc., that are required as part of a development application submission. So, for example, a hydrogeological study would be required in many cases to identify the impact to both groundwater quality and quantity should a development be implemented. So, but what I will note, and this is a great point that you noted in that, more so the cumulative impacts of that. So it is certainly at a site-by-site basis with those studies. But what I will note is that those studies and or the monitoring wells, etc., also factor in the cumulative impacts and or of adjacent development or future development. So that's certainly if I maybe can provide an example, maybe I can just flip through my screen here. Yeah, say for example in Straffordville. So as we know, Straffordville is on partial servicing. There's the Eden, there's a subdivision here that's currently being developed, that again would have gone through the necessary approvals to determine whether the impacts to groundwater quality and quantity through the private wells would be appropriate. So ultimately, they would have accounted for this. Ultimately, that would have been accounted for as those impacts. Now, in the event there's future development on these agricultural tracts here that are not developed yet, in a future plan of subdivision, those studies would flag the existing and or proposed and or phased develop units that are still being constructed on this site. So in essence, they do account for the cumulative impact in that respect on a site-by-site basis and or broader area. Again, I'm not technically qualified to really speak to that, but from my understanding and experience, that they do account for that. But what I will note, and it was a good point that you said about the sub-watershed studies. So it's my understanding that a lot of those policies, in which we did note in the BAM's the first draft official plan, is that it's my understanding that the that would be something initiated through the county at a time, and certainly we don't have the timing on that. But I will note, and I want to provide, I guess, reassurance that there are checks and balances, if you will, through the existing policy framework, that within even the current official plan, as well as this proposed official plan, that do account for such cumulative impacts in that respect. But again, having that sub-watershed study in a more detailed fashion over a broader view, it's my understanding that that's something that would be ultimately implemented by the county and potentially the municipality, but timing on that is unknown. So certainly there, like I said, there are policies in place that do account for those impacts of, the groundwater. But at the same time, there still are the tools, the future tools that can be implemented, such as hydro-G assessments, subwatershed studies, etc., to note that. So. And I would point to, and specifically for you, Suzanne, your comment that it pertains to section 5.12.1. So that really is the section that we would be looking at, or the municipality would be looking at, should a development application come in, which again refers to the hydro-G assessments, hydrogeological assessments, I should say, and their cumulative groundwater impacts prior to any approval, just again to ensure that there's no negative impacts to the groundwater quality and or quantity. And that would be similar for on-site septic as well.
So under section 8.24 of the Elgin official plan, the last item was the establishment of monitoring programs to monitor the impacts of groundwater
Right.
for the long-term sustainability of the groundwater. Is this something? So this is something that is being required by Elgin County. So I'm not sure how that's being implemented.
Yeah, so that is a good point. That is noted, and we have included that. And I'm trying to find the specific section in the official plan, because I do recall us adding that in referring to a monitoring program. So ultimately, that would be led by whether it's the county or the municipality the municipality to establish this monitoring program for the servicing that's existing. And what I will note too, in that um, the and this is maybe a topic for the future really, but there also would be an opportunity for future master servicing plans, because that would ultimately provide the municipality, and that would be municipal led, provide the opportunity for the municipality to get an understanding of what upgrades are required, the capacity, et cetera, for servicing as part of that. So that would certainly be a component of that, monitoring program, if you will. And again, timing on that would occur after the official plan would be adopted and approved, to get a better understanding. And this is an exercise that we discussed regarding any changes to the settlement area boundaries. So again, getting an understanding of the existing servicing situation and monitoring that through what would be known as a master servicing study and or plan for the large municipalities, for the large settlement areas, would be a program that's also initiated. And I would note that master servicing plan and or study is a tool that's added as part of this first draft official plan in the implementation section, so section 11. So that is also another tool that can be used in that respect to address section 8.24 that would be required and initiated by the municipality.
Just to follow up on your point, Christian, it's section 6.4.4 where we mention establishing a monitoring program
Oh, yes.
for municipal and or private systems.
Perfect. No, thanks, Emily. Yes, so that is the specific section. Yeah, so 6441 is where we have that. And again, um, that would be implemented following the adoption and subsequent approval in order to conform to the Elgin County's requirement as per their adopted official plan. So
I just think monitoring is important in order
yes,
to ensure sustainable development on partial services
right,
in with no immediate plans to bring municipal water to the area.
right. And then we certainly concur, and that's why again we have included those um, policies that were required by the county, Elgin County's adopted official plan to note that they are required and are to be initiated and or implemented following the official plan approval. So,
And I'll just add here too. So my experience with rural estate subdivisions or rural subdivisions that are relying on wells, private wells, municipalities can, where there is a concern that might come up through studies that are completed in support of that subdivision, as a condition of that subdivision approval, the municipality can require longer term well monitoring programs to be put in place. So typically if that is needed, and it's not always needed, but if it is needed, that is something the municipality can put in place. And then at the municipal level, there's certainly a bit more ability to implement and maintain longer term monitoring for municipal water supplies, for example. And then when the sub-watershed studies do get completed, um, any assessments that are done in the future in support of subdivisions or new development can tie into those sub-watershed studies, and any recommendations that may come out of those as well, whether it's monitoring or particular caution in certain areas of the municipality where there's higher risk of groundwater contamination or aquifer issues and inadequacies. So I think the good news, I think, is that the policies are set up so that when those situations arise or when the subwatershed studies are completed, we've got the policies in place to essentially put those types of responses into action on a site by site or development by development basis as it happens.
thanks, Mark. Don't be shy. I will note again, I keep stressing this and reiterating it. Oh, perfect. We have someone there. But again, you can always contact us through the email or written submission. So there we have John.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yep, can hear you.
Well, that's excellent. My apologies for being so late.
No worries.
Can I'm not sure if this is relevant or not, but um, Stratfordville and Eden, from a planning perspective, interest me. Are they both restricted in their boundaries as far as expansion of the size of their communities because they are tier two communities as opposed to tier one?
That's a good question. So from what the county of Elgin has included as part of their adopted official plan is that, and I'll go over back to this slide that pertains to that for the settlement areas, but give me a second here. Oh no, it was growth management, my apologies, section 2. So yeah, ultimately, they do have policies that they've included as part of the adopted OP that establish, prohibiting the establishment of new settlement areas, but also, like you noted, permits the expansion of those tier 2 and tier 3 settlement areas until full municipal servicing is available. So that was something that was noted as part of the adopted county official plan. And I may have someone from my staff who's looking at the draft OP right now refer to at least pull that specific section from section 2. But again, that was something that we are adopting, if you will, from the adopted Elgin County official plan in that respect. But what I will note too, and this is just more so a broader comment or general comment, is that the province did, as per the new provincial planning statement, update their settlement area expansion and or adjustment policies. So previously it would have been municipally led, and now it's can be municipally and or privately led for those said boundary adjustments. And certainly there are a number of criteria and or policies, etc., that you'd have to certainly address in that respect. But it's been open now for not just only municipal-led boundary adjustments, but it can also be led by a private owner and or developer. And just to note too, pertaining to your question, John, it would be in section 222, where it refers to the policies of settlement area expansions and establishing new settlement areas. So
May I add an additional comment?
sure, yes, go ahead.
This is a quixotic maybe, but I guess one of the things that I'm sensing is that the amount of growth for a good deal of Elgin, but Bayham, I think, is going to see a great deal more as factory growth and the growth of the battery and all that stuff south of London is going to have, I'm concerned it's going to have a bigger effect than perhaps what's anticipated. How much has that been taken into consideration for growth in Bayham?
Yes, so thank you for that question. Actually, that's a great question, and yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Folks who are online can hear sort of the reasoning and or logic and or impacts of that. So ultimately, as part of the adopted Elgin County's official plan review, when they were going through their review, their studies, their discussion papers, etc., they had prepared a land needs assessment. It was prepared by, I believe it was Hemson Consulting. So they had prepared a land needs assessment to evaluate the projected population growth and the need for residentially designated lands throughout the entire county, as well as employment land. So that was prepared in 2022. Now, to your point about the battery plant, for example, in St. Thomas, they actually ended up amending that. They ended up actually amending that land needs assessment in 2024, I believe, or just before it went to Elgin County for adoption, and they actually accounted for that the potential impacts that new development may have to the county as a whole, and in particular even BAM. So having said that, with all, the new development that may occur within Tilsonburg, Almer, the battery plant in St. Thomas, it was found, as per the land needs assessment by Hemson, that there is approximately an excess of 93 hectares of residentially designated lands, and that only pertains to Vienna and Port Burwell, to meet the needs and or exceed the needs truly of the population growth that's projected until 2051. So it's my understanding that there's about, and this is all noted, and I'll note this to everyone in the call, that this is noted in the introduction section of the draft official plan with respect to what I'm talking about. And it's my understanding that there's approximately a projected population growth as per that Hemson land needs assessment of about 1,200 or 1,300 people from 2024 to 2024 to 2051. So within BAM specifically. So ultimately, at the end of the day, there we in discussions with the county, province, etc., we believe that there's no immediate need at this time, again, given this is a conformity review, to expand through this review the settlement boundary areas. Again, given that there's that 93 odd hectare surplus of residentially designated lands, and that only pertains to Vienna and Port Burwell, and given that the population growth is only projected at around, it's just between just under 1,300 people. So certainly we did account for that as part of this draft official plan, as part of the work that the County of Elgin as well as Hemson Consulting had done. But certainly that is a great question, and I'm glad that you brought that up so I could reiterate that to the group tonight.
Thanks so much. May I ask one other question?
Sure. Yes, please.
I'm associated with the Land Division Committee for Elgin County, and I noticed that the hectare for rural properties, agricultural properties, remains at 40 hectares as ideal. I know that often when surplus dwelling things like that come up, that areas smaller than that are made okay through a bylaw. Why is the 40 hectares still sort of the standard when there appears to be more and more cash crops that produce well on smaller acreages, and even though smaller acreages can still be okayed, unless I'm incorrect, through a bylaw change. Why is the 40 hectares? It feels like a historical or 100 acres number as opposed to something that's rationalized out.
And that's a great point, and I can certainly address that. So that point, and I believe that is noted should be in section 3, around one of the early policies in section 3. But that 40 hectares is directly from the county's adopted official plan. So again, given that's a conformity exercise, that's one aspect of it. Two, which is noted in that policy that is within section 3 pertaining to that 40 hectares for the agricultural lots. The wording is noted as generally. That's my understanding. It should be generally, and it's not shall or is required. So it's more so a guideline, to say the least, that agricultural lots shall generally be are generally in nature 40 hectares. Again, taking that from Elgin County's official plan. And what I will note too, and we do have policies within section 3 pertaining to the severances of agricultural lots as well as surplus farm dwelling severances that are consistent with the PPS as well as conform to the adopted Elgin County OP. But those do have policies in there that do ensure that, say, for a surplus farm dwelling, that the retained lands would have to go through a zoning bylaw amendment to recognize, say, if it doesn't meet the minimum 40 or 20 hectares or whatever it may be in the zoning bylaw. So there certainly are policies that are included in there. And again, I want to reiterate that 40 hectares is not required. It's just generally the minimum standard, if you will. So truly, you're not obligated in that respect, because again, the terminology that's used. But again, that's just more or less taking from the adopted County of Elgin official plan and just using that as a starting point, if you will, for lot sizes.
That's most helpful, actually. Thank you.
Not a problem. I see Barry Wade or Suzanne may have a question.
Okay, so we need development, obviously, in order to increase our tax base. And it seems development right now is because of the applications that are out, is focused in areas on partial services. Typically in a municipality, growth anywhere is going to benefit everybody throughout the municipality. However, focused growth north in areas on partial services is going to negatively impact the current water users on the within the tier one municipal water services. We have 845, I think, current water users, with limited growth happening within the tier one fully serviced areas. So although growth is great, when it's focused in areas on partial services, it's going to have a negative financial impact on the current water users. That's my belief. With the stormwater sewer, with BAM being adamant that that's going to be an area specific tax to Port Burwell residents only for a $30 million project, plus the $20 million that we need to fix our main line coming in, I think Port Burwell and Vienna are going to find themselves unable to afford to live here. So the policies in the official plan are wonderful, but it's the implementation and the requirements that I find are going to be important to the residents that are currently living here. Tourism is big, but nobody is doing anything to improve tourism. They've shut down the West Pier, blocked access. Lighthouse isn't open, it's going to topple. There's nothing happening down in terms of providing amenities and services. We have a limited, vibrant downtown, only a few businesses that thrive. I don't know what can be put in place in order to encourage development within full services, which is what the provincial planning statement wants and is always intended. The fact that we have passed an official plan amendment to allow development on official services is great, because that type of subdivision plan of development is not something we want here in Port Burwell or Vienna. That's something that belongs up in Stratfordville, these large plans of subdivision and housing needs. That's where they belong. So I'm just looking at the whole plan and then moving forward. How do we not, I don't know, how do we go forward in a fair and equitable manner that's sustainable for everybody?
Great. Yeah, no, that's certainly a great point. And what I will note is that, as you noted, certainly the policies that are within this draft official plan that pertain to the tier one settlement areas that are on full municipal servicing, again, like you noted, Village of Vienna, Village of Port Burwell. So those are ultimately where the policies really encourage intensification, infill development, etc. But I will note that a lot of the points that are made, they go beyond what the official plan can do. So there's only so much that, policies and what's written on paper and what can be implemented can do, because at the end of the day, it's truly a lot of this is driven by market demand, location, proximity to, employment areas, etc. And certainly, again, this is just my, based on my experience and such, it certainly that would play a factor in in the development that's occurring, namely, mostly in Eden, like you've noted, or in Stratfordville, which is closer to areas such as, Ulmer or Tilsonburg for employment compared to areas in the south. So I would note that while we have included policies that do encourage greater residential intensification, walk-up apartments, townhouses, etc., that you wouldn't necessarily see in those partially serviced settlement areas, there's only so much that this document itself can do in the grand scheme of all the other, bylaws, legislative documents, etc., in that it really comes down at the end of the day truly to market demand, and there's really so much that we can do in terms of encouraging development. And I would, say that this plan certainly does encourage that. I mean, there's something, intensification is not discouraged, to say the least, in those tier one settlement areas, but again, it comes down to, things like interest rate, price of materials, et cetera, that are beyond this plan that certainly have an impact on where development is focused within the municipality. And again, these policies can only go so far. But again, that's something that we wanted to focus on and ensure that there still is consistency with the new PPS, the new provincial planning statement, as well as the adopted Elgin County official plan, which again, like you've noted, truly requires development within and or intensification within those fully serviced areas, which again, I believe this plan certainly does address. But again, some of the points are noted beyond what this plan can do essentially.
Christian, it's Barry White here. Question, I think one thing that could be done for Vienna and Port Burwell is to increase the density, make it more enticing for developers to come in to intensify development, which you basically just stated. You need to be able to put the offers out there for developers to come in and increase the intensity of development under quality development, obviously. But I think that's one thing that the official plan could do to entice development in the tier ones.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, no, and that's certainly a great point, and that's something that we will note, we can certainly provide a response to, and following this meeting as well, and in terms of looking at ways to increase density permissions. Yeah, because I understand that there are density minimum densities permissions, notably for the residential and I believe the multi-unit residential or harbor residential designation within the first draft official plan. But again, that's certainly something that could be noted and addressed in terms of increasing density permissions. But the one thing I will want to note though is certainly, and again, this may not apply necessarily to Port Burwell or Vienna, just given that it's on full servicing. But like I've noted before, the municipality has not completed a master servicing plan and or study across their settlement areas to determine whether or not there's sufficient capacity, whether upgrades are needed, extensions are needed. I mean, again, I know that that's not to say that may or may not apply for Port Burwell or Vienna, but that's something just to consider as well. Like certainly, it's a balancing act, right? Increased density, but then now there might be constraints on this on the municipal servicing. But again, that's something just to note on our part here. So
We only have capacity for 400 more houses if that's I think for the sewage capacity. So if we fix the water, the storm drains, that would increase the capacity by about another 100 households. But now we have to consider additional residential units when we're looking at development, because now it's not just a single household, now it's potential for 4 households within that lot. You can have 2 residential, 2 ARUs within the dwelling itself, and then 1 separate. So I think there's I don't know, 2, maybe it's only 3 total, but 3 or 4, and as well in the partial services. So that's an unknown, but it still needs to be factored in planning.
yes, and that's certainly a great point, and that's something that can be also noted for even intensification or development that may occur within Port Burwell. I mean, to say though, like I will note that the lots are typically smaller, so there may not be sufficient room on some lots. Again, not all, but some lots within Port Burwell for a detached additional residential unit, or as well as 1 inside. But you're correct in that there are 3 dwellings are permitted as of right, one of which would be the primary dwelling, so the single detached dwelling, townhouse, or semi-detached, and then there's the 2 ARUs, which would be could be attached within or detached. But again, based on those provisions. So yeah, and that's certainly something to consider as well, as part of the sort of capacity servicing aspect of things, is that is that accounting for those additional units that are permitted as of right that may not be built now, but could be built in the next, year or two or three. So
I noticed that earlier you had mentioned that Elgin County wasn't interested in removing the provincial park from the Sullivan boundary of Port Burwell. We are limited with potential growth. If the municipality, or could the municipality go to Elgin and request that this be removed, and that the 62% of the land that takes up our settlement area by the provincial park be reallocated to connect with the special policy area of Windermere? Because right now it's presently landlocked with no access to sewage. And by reallocating the land, it would, let's talk about waterfront. The waterfront is our most valuable piece of land that we have. We're stable on the west side of the provincial park. For the municipality not to consider connecting with the already special policy area for Windermere and removing the provincial park out of the settlement boundary allows for a connection and future growth for Burwell for the next 50 or 100 years. But that's just thinking down the line that there's a master plan there that could actually be interpreted or not brought into the plan that would guarantee that Burwell will continue to grow and will be able to handle the future servicing requirements we're going to need.
Yep, and that's certainly a great point. And I will note too, with respect to the Port Burwell Provincial Park topic, in that and as you noted, we originally had proposed to remove it again based on, it's a park essentially within an urban boundary, and which doesn't necessarily make sense. But really that direction not only came from the county, but I want to stress that it came from the province. And so that direction to keep it in was requested by the province specifically after they had had a chance to review those progress reports and or potential for the alterations to the settlement areas that we'd originally proposed that we had subsequently scrapped, due to in part the province really really stopping that from occurring and noting and really reiterating to us that it's a conformity exercise, because at the end of the day, we are, based on that planning hierarchy, as you know, we are below the county, below the province. So in essence, we certainly have to listen to them in that respect, and that if they didn't touch it, if the county didn't touch it, then we should not touch it in that respect. And again, that was something that was really the province had doubled down on, not necessarily the county. But I'll note too, with respect, and I believe that you're referring to where my cursor is on the lands that are here that are now within that site-specific area. So those ones, again, just based on with the current provincial park being there, there's quite a disconnect. And again, like you noted, it's landlocked. So to include that as part of it would be would not align with the conformity exercise. But I will note that though expansions are permitted, et cetera, within tier 1 settlement areas are certainly encouraged. I want to stress and reiterate though that we do have that 93-ish hectare residential land surplus for the anticipated growth till 2051. So that's something to also consider, and that sure we could do through a land swap from taking a component of a residentially designated land from another settlement area, implementing it here somewhere in the west. But again, that doesn't take away the fact that there's still that surplus, and truly that 93 hectares exceeds the demand for what is necessary to accommodate future housing, future growth within BAM. So.
Can you share what the province's argument was for not removing the park?
It was ultimately, well, namely, it was that it was a conformity exercise, and that it would be maintained as part of the parks that they managed, to just essentially keep the boundary as is, to just exercise what we had discussed and what we are currently discussing is a conformity exercise, and just to maintain it as such. Because again, at the end of the day, the county was even reluctant to make that amendment too, because they would have evaluated that throughout these tier one, notably the tier one settlement areas. I'm not too sure about the tier threes, but the tier ones were, again, everyone knows where growth should be focused. If they didn't touch it in that respect, then that certainly was part of the logic, and that, again, just maintain conformity exercise and you know, maintain our role at the local level compared to those that are higher up at the provincial and county level.
Okay.
Well, we can give maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds or a minute more, but yeah, we certainly value these discussions. I think they're great. I've noted a number of points here, especially with what was noted by Barry, Suzanne, John, et cetera, and others. So yeah, no, certainly it's been great discussion thus far. And as I've noted too in on these slides, and again, I'll continue to reiterate, this is not the end for engagement. There's still opportunity to reach out to us and continue the dialogue. So if I'm not seeing any hands as of right now, then I may conclude with the next steps and or additional information. So I just want to note, and this is a pretty big point, in that first we'll certainly review the comments that we've received tonight and moving forward. But while public engagement will still be ongoing, this is a key point, is that the project will ultimately just be put on hold until the adopted County of Elgin official plan is approved by the province. So as I've noted previously, the adopted County of Elgin official plan was adopted in May of 2024. They still haven't received approval yet. And this is ultimately to ensure that the new BAM official plan will be in conformity with it and reduce the number of revisions and going back and forth, because at the end of the day, based on the comments that we've received tonight, and we have further discussions with those of the public, county agencies, et cetera, if there are any revisions that we make and put pen to paper following this meeting, and the province comes back with revisions, then we may have to just scrap that altogether. So again, while we still will encourage public engagement, that in consultation, all of that will still be ongoing. We won't ultimately, at the end of the day, be putting pen to paper and making the revisions and moving on to phase 4 until the adopted County of Elgin official plan has been approved by the province. Again, to reduce number of revisions and going back and forth, spending time, money, et cetera, on an exercise that would be pointless, and that the province comes back and says, hey, we don't like X, Y, and Z, and we'd have to scrap certain policies. So again, at the end of the day, we will still be listening. Again, like I note on the screen here on the slides, you can still find additional information on this project on the webpage using that link. Also, again, continue to encourage those comments, questions, or feedback using the email. Written submissions can certainly still be mailed in to the municipal office. Again, attention to the official plan review at the Stratfordville office there. And having said that too, I will note that this recording, like I mentioned in the beginning, will be available on the BAM's YouTube channel if you'd like to just go back and see. And I would also note too that that the PowerPoint will be posted as well for your viewing. So having said that, I don't know if there's any closing remarks potentially from municipal staff and such, but I certainly would like to thank everyone for attending tonight, as well as those who may be even listening in on the YouTube live stream right now. So I certainly appreciate it. The dialogue will still continue. Again, project put on hold in terms of pen to paper, but public consultation and engagement will continue on. So having said that, I want to thank everyone. And again, if there are any closing remarks, certainly, Margaret, the floor is yours.
I would just like to
thank everyone for attending, and we appreciate your participation. Just as Christian said, it is an ongoing process. We welcome your comments and your suggestions for considerations. And thanks again, and everyone have a good evening.
Thank you very much.